keys are to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm excited about this episode to kind of dig into the way that Robert Saleh can help the 49ers retool this defense his way. One of the things that Kyle Shanahan has been saying since he sought after getting Robert Saleh back in San Francisco, but also since they signed Robert Saleh to be the defensive coordinator in San Francisco, was how good it felt to be back with Saleh. How comfortable he felt with him being back in the building. He said it's like he never left. But he also said because they've built this together before, he feels like they can do it again. And Robert Saleh didn't just help build the San Francisco 49ers defense. I mean, he got there in 2017. The defense was in shambles. Yeah, they had some pieces that they could build around. They had some guys who really hadn't done much in their career yet. Eric Armstead had been injured so much. What were you going to get out of him? You had DeForest Buckner. Now, he was a blue chipper. You were very excited about what he could do. You had Jimmy Ward at safety, but he had played corner. He had played nickel. He had been all over the place with the other regime. What exactly was he going to provide? There were more questions than there were answers. Yet they figured it out. The San Francisco 49ers, through trial and error, figured it out. And that's what Robert Saleh is there to do again. He's there to figure out what they can do to make this defense better than what it was last season and kind of get it back to where it was when he left after the 2020 season and where DeMeco Ryans took it all the way through the 2022 season. It wasn't bad in 2023 with Steve Wilks, but you could see a little bit of chinks in the armor for that 49ers defense. Now, Robert Saleh, he didn't just stop building defenses. He went to New York and he put together a pretty successful defense there. Now, they had pieces as well. They had a really good interior defensive line. They had a couple of pass rushers. You had some guys that were there. You had C.J. Mosley at linebacker. So they had talent around this football team. But Robert Saleh came in and put his stamp on the defense, that's for sure. One of the things that we're going to go through and we're going to talk about is what picks they've made, or what picks they made in San Francisco, kind of where position-wise they went at certain positions. Maybe that will help us get an idea of how the 49ers approach this draft, when you need to get certain players, what they believe a threshold is to get a starting caliber impact player. And there's a trend with certain positions where Robert Saleh can go and get a player in a certain round, and they can turn out to be a big-time player for the football team. It's not like the mid-round success the 49ers have with fifth-round picks, guys on defense that have just been absolute studs. It's not like that didn't translate to what Saleh did when he was in New York. So the fact that it went with him means he's also on the same wavelength about hitting on those mid-round picks and which positions you can find starters later on in the draft, which is a huge area that he can bring expertise to. And this is not going to be an easy adjustment for Robert Saleh. Not only did the 49ers struggle last year, but then they were absolutely gutted. They are without starting defensive tackles right now. They have one legitimate starting edge defender, depending on what you think about Yetur Gross-Matos. I don't think we saw enough from Yetur to feel very comfortable with him being the guy opposite of Bosa. I mean, what exactly are you going to get out of him? Then Dre Greenlaw leaves in free agency, and we haven't seen the consistency from D. Winter. So you have question marks potentially with two linebacker spots. Your cornerback room is good. That's one great thing. You have two starting corners. Now you have to add depth. That's going to have to happen. And then your safety room, well, we're going to approach that topic as well. Because I'm not sure Robert Saleh has ever had an elite safety room in his entire time being a defensive coordinator for the 49ers or as a head coach for the Jets. They've had a guy here or there. Jimmy Ward was a very solid player. He's not an all-pro player. And that's a interesting dynamic considering Robert Saleh came from the Seattle Seahawks way of playing and the way of coaching. And they had two of the best safeties in that Legion of Boom defense. Cam Chancellor, right? One of the best. Earl Thomas, fantastic. So it's not like this defense doesn't look towards those players. So we're going to go through how the 49ers built their defense, how Robert Saleh built his defense, and then we're going to look at some players and some thresholds in the rounds in the draft that may be targets for the 49ers to potentially build this. I'm going to talk mostly position, but I'm going to give some player names as well to give some reference. But we're going to retool this 49ers defense the Robert Saleh way. Kyle Shanahan's tasked him with doing it. He's going to have to rebuild it. He's got a lot of holes to fill. Maybe there's some opportunities to fill some of those in free agency if you don't get them in the draft, because there's still some good players out there. We'll discuss that a little bit as well. So like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank you for coming by. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. That goes a long way to help me out and just kind of boost me up on some of the charts. So if you could do that for me, I appreciate it. And it means a lot. So let's look at what the 49ers did. Now, the 49ers, Robert Saleh came in 2017, and we know that that team was in complete disarray. In that opening draft, the 49ers focused heavily on defense. They felt like they needed to go big on defense, and they did. Solomon Thomas in the first round with the 3rd overall pick, and then Reuben Foster in 31. Now, if Reuben Foster would have stuck, it probably would have made a big difference in how quickly the 49ers adjusted to being a really solid defense. Now, this is the last time that the 49ers or Robert Saleh take a linebacker this high. It just doesn't happen again. The next closest, Fred Warner in the 3rd round. So, all of us that are wanting Jihad Campbell potentially in round 1, that probably doesn't make sense for the way that Robert Saleh builds a defense and the way that the 49ers have built defenses in the past. They did take Reuben Foster. Maybe if you were trading back up into the end of the 1st round, you would consider Jihad Campbell doesn't have the concerns off the field, but that might go ahead and wipe that out as far as a possibility, even though we would all love it. Ahkello Witherspoon, cornerback in round 3, and we've seen the 49ers go as high as round 2 for cornerback. Now, one of the things that is different, Robert Saleh did go round 1 cornerback in his time in New York, taking Sauce Gardner. So that doesn't discount the potential that the 49ers could go cornerback in round 1. I think it's less likely. I think there's bigger needs. The way Saleh has built his team before, he needed a lights-out corner, right? The 49ers in 2018 got Sherm, so they didn't really need another big-time corner. They were just trying to get somebody to kind of establish it. And when they drafted Ahkello Witherspoon, he was the big, tall, lengthy, fit the old Seattle Seahawks way. This defense has definitely changed. It's not just cover 3, it's also quarters. You have to have some man principles as well. So a little bit different player, but just an idea of how high they drafted a guy. And then how about this? DJ Jones in round 6 was a huge potential spot. Now they went outside linebacker as well with Pita. They got him in the 6th round, and then they took Adrian Colbert, the safety, in round 7. So willing to take safeties late. That has been something we've seen, cornerback threshold. So that was interesting. Now, Reuben Foster, of course, having all those issues, didn't really work out. And so the 49ers the next year draft Fred Warner. He was the first defensive player taken in round 3, and he's been just an absolute stud. The best find that they've had on defense. I mean, absolutely fantastic. In round 3, they also took Tarvarius Moore as they were trying to fix that safety room. So 3rd round potentially, a spot. When you look at what the Jets did, he went safety later than the 3rd round every single time. So they found they could find value, and I think the 49ers are doing the same thing. They've taken safeties in round 3, round 4, with Malik Mustafa, Jair Brown. I don't know if they're willing to go higher than that. I don't even know if they're going to go safety, and we'll talk about that in a second because of some of the guys they took. Kentavious Street in the 4th round, DJ Reed, cornerback, in the 5th round. This is kind of where you see the trend change for Robert Saleh and the 49ers about cornerbacks. It's later in the draft, usually, especially for Saleh. Marcel Harris, a safety that they get in round 6, and then Julian Taylor, defensive tackle, who ended up paying pretty big dividends in the 2019 season. He was a nice depth piece. Nick Bosa, 2 overall. You just have to. He's too good. Dre Greenlaw in round 5, which Dre Greenlaw was considered undersized linebacker that was predicated on speed, and they went ahead and grabbed him. And then later on in the sixth round Tim Harris. So they focused early on in 2017, 2018 on defense. 2019, it was, less focus, even though they did use one of those picks on Nick Bosa. It was important to do that. Now, the last draft that Robert Saleh was in San Francisco for, they took Javon Kinlaw in round 1. That was supposed to be the replacement for DeForest Buckner. We know it didn't work out swimmingly, and that was the only defensive player they took in that entire draft was Javon Kinlaw. They felt like the rest of the defense was pretty much set and ready to go. Now, when he gets to the Jets, they focus so much on offense early, but there's a couple of names to bring up in 2021, his first draft there. First off, in the 5th round, shock, right? They take Jamion Sherwood. Well, Jamion Sherwood is a defensive back, a former safety at the time, who they translate to linebacker. If that sounds familiar, it is, because one thing I didn't talk about was Dre Greenlaw, former safety at one time, moved to linebacker. Fred Warner, a former safety at one time that moved to linebacker. Azeez Al-Shire, a former safety at one point that moved to linebacker. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, a former safety that moved to linebacker. This fits the type of player the 49ers are looking for. Hyper athletic, hyper quickness, who should be able to help cover in space. That's the kind of guys you're looking for. Now, it doesn't always work, right? Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles didn't end up being one of those players that was a stud, but Fred Warner's an all-pro. Dre Greenlaw is an absolute stud. Jamion Sherwood just got a nice big contract out on the open market. Azeez Al-Shire has gotten 2 big contracts in his career. It works. And so I think when you look at the value that the 49ers could potentially find, the fact that he did it in San Francisco with Dre Greenlaw, a 5th round pick, with Azeez Al-Shire, an undrafted free agent, and then with Jamion Sherwood in the 5th round of his first draft that he gets there, you got to believe the 49ers are going to look for linebacker mid-round. This is what I was talking about earlier. Jihad Campbell, he fits the athletic profile of Fred Warner to a T. 6'3", 235, long arms, 4'5", 240. He's actually faster than Fred. More sideline-to-sideline speed. However, you can get guys later on in the draft that are less Fred and more Dre, that are less Fred and more Azeez. And I think that's something to consider when you're looking at guys in this draft. Now, one of the guys I love is mid-round guy. You're talking about Chandler Martin. Chandler Martin comes out of Memphis, and he is a very talented guy. And I think you can get him in round 4, round 5. Field Yates just put a 4th round grade on him, and everyone else has been talking about how he's probably going to go undrafted. I've been a huge fan of this guy. He's a sideline-to-sideline guy, 5'11", 230 pounds. Undersized, yes. But this dude is an absolute hitter, and he flies around and makes plays. He's an option. Carson Bruner, quick linebacker from Washington. He's a possibility. There are guys late in this draft that the 49ers could potentially grab that would make sense. A guy like Eugene Asante, right? And we all know about the other names, right? The Jeffrey Bossa, the Teddy Buchanan. Those guys fit as well. But athletic, freak, quick twitch, athletic linebackers in rounds 4 and beyond, I think make the most sense for the 49ers, even though I would love to get a Jihad Campbell in round 1. I would love to get a Danny Stutzman in round 3. I think that those dudes are talented. I think Jihad Campbell's the best linebacker in this draft, and I think Danny Stutzman is the best run-stopping linebacker in this draft. And I just think that he's the best at doing it. He's got the feel. He's able to shed blocks and make plays. And some people will disagree with me, but I think he is. So I think now the 49ers and Robert Saleh are going to wait to go linebacker until day 3. And, I would love to be wrong and them go Jihad Campbell. I would love for them to be wrong and go with, other guys in this draft that are a little bit higher. A guy like Demetrius Knight or Chris Paul, right? Those guys have been the ones everyone's been talking about. A lot of people come on here every day and tell me about Carson Schlesinger, a good player out of UCLA. But I think that we need to kind of just decide that Robert Saleh more than likely is going to wait to go linebacker. And what does that mean? Because I know we need a starter. Well, what it could mean is they're going to address it in free agency. And, I thought that the owner did a pretty good job, Jed York, of saying, hey, free agency is not exactly done. And Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have talked about this in the past. They wish the draft happened before free agency. Veteran players don't want that because they want to get paid before you fill those holes, or some of those veteran players will get priced out. The market will change, and so they don't want that. So this is an approach the 49ers can still have. You have a guy like CJ Mosley that is available, that knows Robert Saleh, and I get it. He only played 4 games last year. He was a guy that dealt with injuries a lot, and so that might be concerning. He's over the age of 30. That might be concerning. But I think when you look at the people that are still available, to play linebacker, I think that there's some good ones, and I think CJ Mosley is one of those guys that you can plug and play. You could get a guy like Kaiser White to step in that's got the athletic profile, to be able to make those plays. You could get Eric Kendricks, who you wanted to get last year, that could step in. That's 33 years old, but understands the job until you can get one of these young cats ready to go. So I think that makes sense. And I think just looking through what they did as far as 49ers, as far as Jets, it's the mid-round linebacker that has made the most impact and that they've got the most out of. Jamian Sherwood was a great one. And so you see Fred Warner, he was a 3rd-round pick. Like this is something that they did and develop. And they're not afraid to go out in free agency and get one. They went and got Quan Alexander when the 49ers needed a linebacker next to Fred Warner. They got Quan Alexander to come in and play the role. Then the 49ers drafted Dre Greenlaw, and they didn't really need Quan anymore. Plus, he got hurt, but they've been willing to do this. The Jets went out and got linebackers, went out and got edge guys. So that's something I noticed. The other thing I noticed was Jason Pinnock, who the 49ers signed this year, was a 5th-round pick of the Jets at pick 175, and of course he came out as a cornerback out of Pitt. So they got Jason Pinnock to now sign in San Francisco. So the 49ers like to hit on defensive backs, especially nickel corners. You talk about Deommodore Lenoir, right? You talk about safeties like Talanoa Hufanga, guys in those later rounds that they can have step in and make plays. Well, they don't have to draft him. This is one of Robert Saleh's guys in Jason Pinnock. And he really wanted to keep him, but roster-wise, they weren't able to, and he went to the New York Giants. Well, now Robert Saleh is getting one of his guys with 4 years experience. So this is like getting one of those 5th-round guys back, but it's kind of detailing what he likes to do in those mid-rounds, getting guys. In that same draft, he got Hamza Nasruddin, the defensive back out of Florida State. They got Brandon Eccles, the cornerback out of Kentucky. And then they drafted a defensive lineman, Jonathan Marshall. But look at that. They went safety, Michael Carter. They went cornerback, Pinnock. They went Nasruddin, the defensive back. They went Eccles, the cornerback, all in a row. 5 defensive backs in a row. And Sherwood would have been 6, but we knew that they were moving him to linebacker. Now, interesting that he comes from Auburn, and everyone's been talking about Samuel, the Auburn linebacker, just recently. So that's what they did in 2021 that kind of gave an idea, his first one there. After that, this is where they went crazy, and they had 2 first-round picks, so they took Sauce Gardner. Now, they also took a first-round linebacker in Jermaine Johnson. So that would show you the edge defense is a high priority, right? They're going to do it again. Another draft pick coming up, they take Will McDonald, and they get another draft pick. But the fact that they ended up having 3 first-round picks to get that edge defender. That's one of the reasons that I think it's interesting the way that they're going to build. Later on, they took a defensive tackle and Michael Clemens. They only picked in the 4th round that year. They traded away all their other picks, but they did a really good job. But Jermaine Johnson, Jermaine Johnson didn't really do what they were hoping he was going to do as far as, dominate. But they got themselves, an edge player. And that one they hit Sauce Gardner and Jermaine Johnson. So he's not against taking an edge defender early on. We've seen it with Bosa when he was with San Francisco. We've seen it there. Then they took Will McDonald in 2023. And this is a guy out of Iowa State that's a quick, twitch, fast guy off the edge. Can do some things off the edge. And who does he remind me of? Well, I think he reminds me of Mike Green. And I think that Mike Green could be a potential target for the 49ers. I think he's been picking up steam over the last several years. But when you're sitting at 11, one thing we know about the San Francisco 49ers defense in 2019 that was different than 2018 was the fact that they could put pressure on the quarterback. And what changed? Well, first off, the makeup of the 49ers defense changed. So they traded for D Ford. And D Ford comes in, you draft Nick Bosa, and all of a sudden, when you get to obvious pass downs, you have legit pressure makers off the outside. Also, what they did, because they brought in D Ford, they had the ability to move Eric Armstead in. So DJ Jones was the plug defender. He was the one tech. Buckner played the three tech. So those guys were set. When they went to obvious pass downs, Armstead moved inside and D Ford came in. Right now, the 49ers have Nick Bosa, but I don't think they have a legitimate pass rusher out on the outside. But what they might have is their Eric Armstead type player in Yetur Gross-Matos. That might be why they chose him over Leonard Floyd. They feel like they could get a consistent play. Now, is he going to play out on the edge, the run as well as Armstead? I don't think so, but they might believe they can get that type of play. So adding a Mike Green to the outside to build this defense might be very D Fordish, where he comes in and the first year, most of his snaps are coming on 2nd and long and 3rd and long. He's a closer. Yetur Gross-Matos plays on base downs. That would be a 2019 makeup that might make sense for Saleh. Gross-Matos moves inside. Right now, if you were looking at this defense, you're either pulling Jordan Elliott off the field, who's not a 3-down defender, or Evan Anderson. Let's say Evan Anderson is your DJ Jones type player. And I think the 49ers could address in this draft getting a better, and I don't want to slight Evan Anderson, but a better plug defender, right? There's too many guys that are available. Kenneth Grant, Tyleik Williams, CJ West. You start talking about these guys, Alfred Collins. There's a lot of guys that are available that you could get to be plug defenders in your defense that are 2-down defenders. But I think taking Mike Green kind of sets you up for that. You get Evan Anderson in that position. He comes off. You move Yetur Gross-Matos inside. He rushes, and you draft a 3-tech. Later, maybe in round 2. If you take Mike Green in round 1, maybe in round 2, you go ahead and you take a TJ Sanders, or you take an Omar Norman Lott, who they met with. Omar Norman Lott would be another nice player to add with one of the best win rates from a defensive tackle in the NFL draft. In fact, the best, over 20% win rate on pass rush downs. That's the best. The other guys who are really good at it are Derek Harmon and Aeneas Peebles. Those dudes are the cream of the crop. But you could easily get a 3-tech like a TJ Sanders or an Omar Norman Lott in rounds 2, round 3, and then you're kind of set up. Go Green, go Sanders, and then you kind of have that build along that defensive line, or then you can address linebacker a little bit later. So we're starting to get an idea of how you can retool this defense in a 2019 method. And I'm not saying it has to be identical. I'm just saying that would be a nice direction to go. Now, it doesn't have to be Mike Green. He just feels very D Fordish. They've met with Mykel Williams. Mykel Williams is not going to be the speed element. This is a more base defensive end. This is not the kind of guy that Robert Saleh has drafted when you look at Will McDonald and others, right? Guys that would fit more that bill, a guy like James Pierce, Donovan Ezeraku. I think those guys kind of fit. What you're looking for is that speed edge that can bring pressure off the edge. Those guys make more sense. If you're looking for more of a base defensive end that can play opposite of Bosa, Mykel Williams, Nick Scorton, I think those guys would make a lot of sense. So I think that there's options for the 49ers to build this. I do think they need to go edge in one of the first 3 rounds. So one of their top 4 picks needs to be edge to be able to sufficiently get the player that can bring pressure off the outside when you're not in base downs, when Yetur Gross-Matos is sliding inside. I think that is a key element to rebuilding this defense and retooling it in Robert Saleh's direction, the way that he's going to want it to go. So that was something I wanted to point it out, because going Jermaine Johnson and then going Will McDonald kind of gives you an idea. And they even, last year, they brought in a player as well off the edge. So I'm going blank on the edge defender that sat out forever, Hassan Reddick. I'm sorry. He sat out, for a long time, but once again, a speed element. That is something that Robert Saleh has been using and wanting out there on the field. And I'll be honest, Will McDonald's been dreadful against the run. I think Mike Green, I think that James Pierce Jr., all those guys, as far as speed elements, are better against the run than them. But early on, you might not need them to be a 3-down defensive end for your football team. In round 6 of that 2023 draft, they took Zaire Barnes, linebacker. Once again, late linebacker. Then they took Jarek Bernard Converse, late cornerback. Once again, late for linebacker and cornerback. Seems to be what they do unless it's one of the big-time can't-miss Sauce Gardner type guys. You go with a defensive line early, and then you take those other positions later. And in the most recent draft, Robert Saleh's last one at the helm, they did not take a defensive player until round 5 when they took Quantez Stiggers. And, never really developed into anything in the 1 year, but it just kind of goes to illustrate what they're trying to do. So re-putting and recalibrating this team, I think it starts with that edge spot and the defensive tackle spot. Those are going to be the 2 elements that he needs to hit. He needs to make sure that they get the edge defender that is either going to be able to do both, which there are some guys, but if you're looking for an elite pass rusher early, a guy that can bend the corner, a guy like Mike Green makes sense. And I get it. If you have any sense that the accusations against him are true, that the red flags, you wipe him off your board. You don't take a chance. You go another direction. I'm 100% behind that. But I think if you're looking for a player that most represents D Ford, I think you're looking at Mike Green. You're looking at James Pierce Jr. You're looking at Donovan Ezeraku. I think those guys fit. And so those are some guys that I'm definitely interested in the 49ers getting in one of their first 2 picks. I don't know if Ezeraku will be there when they go 43. You might have to trade up and get him. And we know that they're going to be looking at defensive tackle as well. But I think that when you're looking for value when it comes to defensive tackle, I think the 49ers need to hit 3 tech first. And so that's why I don't think it'll be Kenneth Grant early. It's going to be Walter Nolan. It's going to be Derek Harmon. It's going to be TJ Sanders. It's going to be Omar Norman Lott. It's going to be a penetrator, somebody that can put pressure. Because when you look at what they've done with the 49ers and with the Jets, they took their plug defenders late. 49ers got Evan Anderson, who's a plug defender, a 2-down player, as an undrafted free agent. The 49ers in 2018 or 2017 took DJ Jones, plug defender, in the 6th round. And he was successful doing that. So you can find those plug defenders, these big guys who eat up space eaters that can make plays. You can find them later in the draft. So I think linebacker later, plug defender later. I think those 2 things would definitely make sense. Anywhere on day 3 for both of those guys makes sense. Now, what about cornerback? Because when Robert Saleh got to San Francisco, it's not like they were set at cornerback. They signed Kawan Williams. He was going to play nickel. Well, you have Deommodore Lenoir. You have Deommodore Lenoir on the outside. He moves inside. You do need to get a third cornerback. We've seen that the 49ers have had a little bit of success with cornerback in round 5 with Deommodore Lenoir. But for the most part, this has been a position they've missed on. They finally hit it last year. They had a lot of success. They did hit it, of course, with Reed in 2017. DJ Reed was a 5th-round pick, so they've had some success in round 5. Could the 49ers go higher? I think this is one of the things that's interesting. Could they go round 3? Would they go round 2? A lot of people look at that round 2 cornerback room and start seeing some guys who could potentially go there at pick 43. And who are we talking about at pick 43? Siobhan Ravel, because he's dealing with the injury, would fit definitely what Robert Saleh wants, a 6'3", over 200-pound cornerback. I think there'll probably be injury concerns. Benjamin Morrison, same thing out of Notre Dame, solid player. Injury concerns are going to be something that they're going to keep an eye on. Trey Amos and Azareye'h Thomas, Amos out of Ole Miss, Azareye'h Thomas out of Florida State. These are our draft and play guys. I think if either one of these guys slip, and I think Trey Amos is actually going to move up, probably really close to the first round, if not into the first round, I'm going to have a first-round grade on him the same way I did Kamari Lassiter last year, guy who fell into the early part of the second round and then had 5 picks. So I think Trey Amos is a really solid player. I think he would be a dynamite pick if he made it to 43. I don't think he's going to be there. I think he's going to kind of go in between. Azareye'h Thomas, another guy that could go up into the first round. But I think Maxwell Hairston goes in the first round and maybe pushes one of those guys down. 43 would be a hotbed for them. After that, Darian Porter, I really like him as well. I think the 49ers could address cornerback at 43 or 75. But I think with Robert Saleh being there, they're going to be very, very keen on waiting a little bit to get that cornerback that they feel like they can get, because they've highlighted guys in the past. They've been able to hit guys, like Deommodore Lenoir, guys like DJ Reed, that they might be able to wait a little bit longer and try to hit one of those guys later on in the draft. A guy like Kobe Bryant, who's a little bit thin but is really good in coverage. Robert Saleh has Sauce Gardner, not exactly the most physical presence, but can still play. A guy like Quincy Riley, who could step in and battle. Jacob Parrish, those guys make sense. Noel Williams, another guy out of Cal. So there are some mid-round options for the 49ers when it comes to cornerback. When it comes to safety, I don't think the 49ers are going to draft a safety now. They met with Andrew Makuba. I would love for them to get their hands on Nick Emenwari, Andrew Makuba. I think those guys would be great. Jonas Sanker, I think he would be great at Illinois, but I don't think they're going to go safety. I think signing Jason Pinnock, I think going out there and getting Grant, I think that they've pretty much established themselves that they're going to compete with Jair Brown and with Malik Mustafa. And you might ask why. Every time we looked at what the Jets did at safety, they usually signed free agents. The safeties that they signed, even then they weren't expensive, really big safeties. They would let their big-time safeties go. But when you looked at the draft picks, it was always usually later round guys that they were looking to develop. And I think that's when you start finding those thresholds. So I think if the 49ers are going to go safety, it's going to be day 3. So nothing before that. So if Andrew Makuba made it to day 3, they might think that's too much value. But I think after that, you're looking for guys that can come in and compete. But even then, you look at this roster with Richie Grant and with Jason Pinnock and others, it's pretty much loaded. And we've seen Robert Saleh get a lot out of Jaquiski Tartt. We've seen him get a lot out of Jimmy Ward. Does he believe he can get a lot out of Malik Mustafa and Jair Brown? I think he knows he can get a lot out of Malik. The question is, what does he think he can get out of Jair Brown? And maybe he thinks, hey, he just wasn't being used right. I seen some of the things that Steve Wilkes was doing with him that benefited him, and I can use those strengths in my defense, and he's going to be just fine. I think if he can find those things, great. But this is how Robert Saleh is going to build this defense. They're going to focus on edge and D-tackle early. I don't think that's a big surprise. But I think what it will do is all the people that have been saying, hey, linebacker, potentially day 1, day 2, I think it's less likely to happen. I would love to have Jihad Campbell. I think he would be a stud. I would love to have Schlesinger. I think he'd be a stud. I don't think those guys are going to be guys the 49ers go for. I don't think they're going to get Demetrius Knight. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they're going to wait. And I think you're probably going to see a day 3 linebacker, probably a couple day 3 linebackers come in and compete for Robert Saleh's defense. I think you're going to see some cornerbacks, probably starts in day 2, that you potentially see cornerback. I don't think it'll be first round. And safety, I just don't think they're even going to draft one. If they do, it'll probably be late, probably undrafted free agent. So it's interesting. Plug defender, probably later in this draft as well, day 3. I don't know. I don't know if they'll draft a CJ West in day 2. Maybe late day 2 if he's still there. And I think that'll make a lot of people frustrated. But there's other guys potentially available that you can get as plug defenders. And you have one right now in Evan Anderson. And yes, you can improve the position, that's for sure. But I think that's what's going to happen. So linebacker is going to be later, I believe. I think safety is going to be a no-go. I think cornerback is going to potentially be later if they don't strike in round 2. I think if they strike in round 2, you're going to get a very talented cornerback. I think there's a spot in round 3, maybe 75 if someone falls. Other than that, I think this is going to be a day 3 pick at cornerback when it comes to depth. This is just how Robert Saleh does it. But if you have a linebacker that used to play safety, he might be a guy that they end up going for. So very interesting to see the way Robert Saleh built 2 different defenses, and now he's going to be looking to construct another one again. I think this is the best way they retool in the draft, is by going some of these positions later and focusing on defensive line, which he has to rebuild. This is the first situation that Robert Saleh has been in, whether that was in San Francisco or New York, that didn't really have any defensive tackles to work with. So that is going to be one of the differences between his previous situations and this one. But I think if they hit it right and you hit 3 tech first, you can get that plug defender later and still get a lot of talent along the way. So let me know what you think about this conversation in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. I appreciate all of you. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.